Following is a presentation of Learfield IMG College. From the Georgia Southern Sports Network, powered by Learfield IMG College.
Wings up, Eagle Nation! Touchdown, Georgia Southern!
This is Inside Eagle Nation, your all-access look into Eagle athletics.
Taking a look through all the other action in Georgia Southern athletics this past week, a lot of road action, a lot of teams hitting the old I-16 out of town.
Getting on the steel horse and taking us to parts north, south, west, wherever. Can't really go too much farther east.
Now let's return to the Learfield IMG College studios. Here are your hosts, Colin Lacy and Danny Reed.
That's a fact, Jack.
Another Monday, and it's another time for Inside Eagle Nation, your all-access look inside Georgia Southern Athletics and the official podcast for Georgia Southern Athletics as well. Colin Lacy alongside the voice of the Eagles, Danny Reed, and it has finally come, Mr. Reed. It is football season. Well, it's always football season.
Yeah.
But it is officially camp season for Georgia Southern football, starting practices last week. Gone through just knocking on the door of a week of camp, and camp is a little bit more condensed now that the schedule gets shifted around, but got almost a full week of camp under the belt so far.
And it's funny talking to people who went through camp maybe as recent as 5, going back to 10 years ago, where the idea of camp was it was multiple weeks, sometimes as long as a month, but now that school starts pretty much at the beginning of August, for those that aren't familiar, classes are going to start on Wednesday the 10th. They're having all kinds of orientation over the next couple of days. Move-in was this past weekend. Cars have returned to campus, so parking and traffic will definitely be issues as they are throughout this time of the year. But, yeah, a weekend fall camp, a couple of scrimmages we'll get a chance to talk about. One of those coming up this weekend as part of Irk Russell Donor Weekend. It's going to be a night scrimmage on Saturday. But we're going to get a chance to start to preview this squad, beginning with the offense.
So the next couple of weeks, and it's hard to believe only about 3 weeks until you get to game week for Georgia Southern football. So we will take the next couple of weeks to preview what the offense looks like, what the defense looks like, hit on the special teams, because there's a lot to talk about on the special teams side of the ball this year. But today we will start with the offense. We'll do that a little bit later in this week's edition of Inside Eagle Nation. Talk about the Irk Russell Fund weekend and Irk Russell Donors weekend coming up this weekend, because it's a little bit expanded from what it has been in years past. But we'll dive into that a little bit later on in this week's edition of Inside Eagle Nation. As always, you can get your questions in on Facebook Live. You can tweet us at GS Sports Network. You can email us to GSSNBooth. GSSNbooth@gmail.com, or you can text us 912-274-3607. Get your questions, your comments, concerns. I've always asked for jokes. Chad Willis, I'm sure, has a dad joke or two to get to us.
Yeah, if we can get that to be a thing, we'll do a weekly dad joke.
Oh, I'm sure it'll be a thing.
One thing we should probably mention before we launch into Eagle Athletics, news coming out not too long ago about the passing of Olivia Newton-John at the age of 73. And it's still one of the best singing performances I've ever heard in my life was Big Frank in Lewiston, Idaho in September of 2015 singing both parts of You're the One That I Want.
Yes, that was...
Both parts.
He was supposed to have a partner. The partner bailed.
No, he was just singing both parts of it. The partner actually joined him late, and he didn't realize he started singing both parts of the song, the John Travolta and the Olivia Newton-John part. But that was, of course, my first road trip with you guys, and that was my introduction.
That was your indoctrination to the
Life
network.
on the Road. Yeah, but watching Frank's, I'm thinking, okay, does Frank that he sang Big Butts a little bit later on? Head coach Willie Fritz found out about that. But I'm thinking, okay, does he do karaoke every trip? Does he find a new song to sing every trip?
You know, if there's a microphone, there's a chance.
That was a nice way to start, but of course, sad about the passing of Olivia Newton-John, but to somehow tie that back into some of our previous experiences, being that was the first time I really got to hang out with you guys in that capacity. That was memorable.
Welcome to the crew. Here's Idaho.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Our only trip, at least in the Sun Belt, of course, going out there in '88 to Pocatello for the national championship against Furman that year. But
Only time to the Kibbe Dome, and we saw the world's largest potato, and it was fake.
Terry punted on the field.
Yeah, because we had gone out Thursday, went to the Kibbe Dome on Friday to set everything up. Terry was punting on the field.
And we saw that the goalposts didn't have a connection to the ground. They were hooked
That's
up to
right.
the walls, so they just stuck out. So you could see the crossbar and the uprights, but there was no H-bar, or there was no
That's right.
single dedicated.
It's almost like the Arena League.
Yeah.
There's only a couple of things I remember, and we're not going to get too far into the Idaho trip for a lot of people's safety. There's only two things I remember about that trip. One, Matt Breida's long run.
Both of them.
Matt Breida's long run. And then driving to, because we stayed in Lewiston.
Game was in Moscow, about 45 minutes away.
Drove over to Moscow, and remember the drive over, really pretty drive. But for whatever reason, we were listening to a certain radio show, and it was talking about the wrestlers.
Yeah.
And that's when Frank got on his tangent of just naming a bunch of old wrestlers.
The part of that drive that I remember was when we got into an area where everybody lost cell signal, and we thought we were going to get
that
lost.
was coming from the airport. Because we got in a little bit later on Thursday.
Right.
We were later getting our rental car and weren't able to follow the buses out. And so we took a wrong turn. Next thing we know, nobody has cell service. We're in the middle of Idaho. None of us had ever been to the state, let alone knew where we were. And we sent Terry into a convenience store that...
Yeah, we pulled into an empty parking lot with a convenience store that had one light on.
Uh-huh.
And then we ended up in a neighborhood.
Terry went in, and I'll be darned, he got directions, and we finally got to where we were going. I had doubts. I'm not going to lie.
When we were on our way back from the Dome on Friday, I remember driving by a bunch of high school fields, and I want to say there were some fall baseball games going on, maybe some football practices. But, yeah, just like you said, that's one of the most gorgeous drives I can ever remember.
Anyway, we'll digress in the Idaho geography.
Didn't think we'd get that much into that. But
never know what you're going to get on the Inside Eagle Nation. We dive into this week's news and notes around Georgia Southern athletics. Everything's starting to get fired up. You got volleyball getting on campus, getting going. Men's and women's soccer getting everything firing on all cylinders. Women's soccer had the Sun Belt Conference Women's Soccer Preseason Awards announced earlier on today. A couple of Georgia Southern Eagles on the All Sun Belt team in the preseason. Ellis Nemtsov, along with Sade Heinrichs, coming in as a All Sun Belt selection. And as far as teams are concerned, splitting into the East and West like most of the sports are in the Sun Belt Conference. But Georgia Southern picked 4th in the East, but not too far. We've got Old Dominion leading the way. They get 10 out of the 12 first-place votes. And then James Madison in second place, followed by Georgia State and Georgia Southern right on the heels. They're in 4th. And so the Sun Belt is taking notice of what Chris Adams and company did not only last season but in the offseason.
It's another reflection as well of what this league brought in. We've spoken a little bit about our 4 new brethren in this conference, but for Old Dominion and James Madison to get picked 1 and 2 in this league, having not had a single kick in this league yet, shows you the strength of the program. Of course, on the West, South Alabama, the runaway favorite. It's been their league for all but once over the last decade. But that'll be one to watch considering what has been brought in, and we'll see if the Eagles can back up what they did last year.
Yeah, you look at the 4 new teams in the Sun Belt as far as women's soccer is concerned, and we've talked about it a lot since the 4 new teams joined, or were going to join and then finally joined July 1. You've got Old Dominion, James Madison, 1-2 in the East. Marshall ends up being number 6 in the East. And then Southern Miss, number 3 in the West. And so we've talked about it a lot, how it's not just a football move. This helps all sports. And we'll get into men's soccer when the preseason awards come out. And if you don't have the 4 new teams, you don't have Sunbelt men's soccer.
Yeah, I'm going to guess on the men's side you hear a little bit about Marshall, possibly.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
A little bit.
Maybe some JMU throw in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll come up.
Yeah.
But you also had another announcement come out last week. Some fall baseball schedule coming out. Going to have South Georgia State coming to J.I. Clements Stadium Saturday, October the 8th. And then Saturday, October the 22nd, a couple of weeks later, USC Upstate will make the way over to J.I. Clements Stadium, in the Fall World Series will be the following weekend, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of October 27th through the 29th at J.I.
Steaks versus hot dogs. And, of course, a couple of years ago, the NCAA allowed teams to have up to 2 fall scrimmages. And it's lucky for the Eagles. They don't have to worry about the travel, but they do welcome in 2 solid programs. USC Upstate has had one of the better programs over the last 5 years. I think they had one of the better offenses in the country last year. So that'll be a nice way for this team to test itself and see what they really have after a 41-win season.
Talked about this a little bit last week, but Georgia... Wait, there it is.
Real quickly, with USC Upstate, congratulations to former Eagle Jacob Contra-Bogan, the new pitching coach for the Spartans.
That's right. How about that? Also, coming out last week, as far as baseball is concerned, congratulations to former Director of Operations, Christian Bourne, now the pitching coach at Radford. He is somebody that is going to do very well as a pitching coach in college baseball.
Getting back closer to his home, of course, he pitched James Madison, worked as a high school coach for a while, was invaluable with his contribution on this staff last year. He did a lot of the things that nobody noticed on the outside, but now him getting a chance to run his own pitching staff, I would expect Radford to get back to where they were not too long ago. Because remember, when they came here in 2016, they had won 45 games in 2015. That's a couple of coaching staffs ago, but they're not all that far removed from that kind of success in the Big South.
Can't wait to see what Christian Bourne does up at Radford, calling pitches and doing everything that he is built to do as a pitching coach in college baseball.
Good for him.
But on the football side of things, we talked about it last week, Georgia Southern starting the 40-year anniversary team. Last week, offensive line and defensive line, the voting for that has closed. Again, every Monday through Thursday, you're going to be able to vote for a different group or different position group. This week, the 8th, starting today through the 11th on Thursday, you have the specialists and slot backs. Now, there's some names. I was going through filling out my ballot earlier today.
This is a tough one. Specialist is a tough one.
Specialist, you get to vote up to 9, and I think I voted for 8. I think I voted 8. I could have voted for more, but if I only got 9, there was a couple you couldn't vote in without adding other people.
Right.
You got, obviously, folks like Tyler Bass, Youngwei Koo, Derek Keaton coming into as a return specialist, Ryan Langan, the only long snapper on the list, Adrian Mora, Charlie Edwards, Tim Foley, Jason Foster as a return specialist as well.
You are tugging at Terry's heartstrings now.
Oh, yeah.
Big time.
Oh, yeah. And then slot backs, you've got 5 to choose from. You can only vote for 3, or you can vote up to 3. There's one that I feel like you have to vote for, and that's Hop, Darryl Hopkins. I didn't realize he was a slot back. I don't know. I don't know what I thought he was, but I didn't realize he was a slot back.
Listening to Terry tell the story of him scoring 2 touchdowns in the second half of the title game in '90 to help seal up Nevada-Reno is a good one.
How about it, Hop? I hear you.
I mean,
You got Ricky Harris, Monty Sharp. Got a lot of good names on this list to choose from, but again, you get 9 specialists, and there's a couple of folks that you wouldn't have necessarily thought of as specialists.
one that pops into my mind right away, and somebody that you could see in multiple categories, Jason Foster is a return specialist.
Yeah.
Because he had the one punt return touchdown against App State as a freshman in 2004, ran back the punt for a touchdown against Central Arkansas in 2006, but he's obviously going to be on the quarterback list whenever that comes out. So how people divvy up their voting over these next few weeks, that'll be interesting to see who goes in what category.
So again, this week you get to vote for specialists and slot backs. Next week it's wideouts and DBs. Running backs and linebackers the following week, the 22nd through the 15th. And then the week of game week, it's going to be the quarterbacks. And I'm going to guess that's a heavily contested one. That's why they kind of gave it its own little week.
With the full team to be announced on the 2nd, leading into the game against Morgan State on the 3rd.
Correct. So you can get your votes in now for the specialists and slot backs. Anybody on this list that you're going to protest if it's not in there?
I wouldn't say necessarily protest, but the specialist category is so tough because do you vote just kickers in? Do you have to think about your return specialist? Do you vote for Ryan Langan since he's the only long snapper? And look, long snapper has had a long legacy. You're going back to Stan Stipe. Of course, it's been Carter Jones. There have been a lot of guys that have been very good in that position. But do you have return specialists? Do you vote for multiple punters, multiple kickers? But the fact that you get to pick 9, it's sort of telling you that you can get a little bit of everything. But if you're somebody that only wants to vote for a couple, say 1 kicker and 1 punter, you can do that. Good thing for us is that just in the recent history, had Bass, had Koo, had Ryan Langan. So that's pretty recent.
To give you an idea, you've got 24 names to choose from, and you can pick up to 9. So you're gonna have to be cutting pretty thin off that bone. So,
but knowing how,
and by the way, Ryan Langan did make my ballot.
If you're going to pick a long snapper, he's the one you got to pick.
Right.
500 snaps in his career, never had a bad one.
Yeah.
Won a USFL championship with the Birmingham Stallions, which of course is going to factor into your decision.
I mean, yeah, why not?
This is a cool list, and I'm interested to see how people handle this. You can look at, okay, running backs, quarterbacks, wide receivers. That's pretty cut and dry. But with specialists, you've got those other categories in the midst of all this. So like I was talking about before, what do you value as being a member of this team? A lot of it's going to be what you saw.
Yeah.
Depending on what era you watched. If you're somebody that grew up with Georgia Southern football, I don't know how you don't put Tim Foley on your team. Somebody who kicked on the first 2 championship teams, made 4 field goals in the first half of the 86 title against Arkansas State, had the 63-yarder against James Madison in 87. There's a lot of different ways you could go.
So the 40-year anniversary team, the voting going on right now for slot backs and specialists, but talked about it at the beginning of the show. The next couple of weeks going to dive into a football preview. In years past, we've done it where we go position group by position group, whether it be quarterbacks to running backs to wide receivers. This year, going to switch it up a little bit because, yes, there are nuances in each of the position groups that are different. You've got new blood coming into a couple of the different groups especially, but thought that it was going to be a little bit better to take it offense as a whole, defense as a whole, special teams as a whole the next couple of weeks and break down the whole shebang, if you will.
You've got new schemes in all 3 phases. So instead of spreading out how do quarterbacks mix in, how do running backs factor in, it's better to just deal with each phase as its own pie. Now, we're going to eat every slice here in the next few minutes. Then we'll have a defensive pie, then we'll have a special teams pie, and then eventually Morgan State's going to come down for Baltimore. We're going to have a football game.
All right, favorite kind of pie, go.
Apple.
All right.
That's...
Excuse me, I didn't mean to offend you by asking you what kind of pie you
I thought the way you looked at me, I felt like I had to say chocolate pie, but I don't consider chocolate pie a pie.
What?
I don't think that's a pie.
What is it?
I think it's just pudding. I don't think that's a pie.
In a pie crust? Apple pie is just apples in a pie crust.
But you don't consider the apple filling as something you would eat. You would eat chocolate pudding by itself. You don't need a pie crust to make it more enjoyable. It's great on its own.
You can have like fried apples. That's the same thing as a pie filling.
Now you're splitting hairs. That's not true.
All right, here's the question for Eagle Nation. Is a chocolate pie a pie?
The exact opposite of whether a hot dog is a sandwich.
Exactly.
I think this could drum up something.
Yeah, I think it could.
I don't look at chocolate pie. I know that they sell those little pocket pies in the wrapper, and they're delicious. But to me,
sometimes
it's just crust with chocolate pudding, a dessert in and of itself.
Right.
as far as apple, you don't eat the filling. The filling is part of the apple pie, like cherry pie, like pecan pie. You wouldn't eat that necessarily on its own, to me. But I love chocolate pie.
I don't know about that one.
I love chocolate pudding. I just don't consider it chocolate pie.
I don't know about that one, Mr. Reed.
That's okay.
Eagle Nation will have to weigh in. Is chocolate pie a pie? Would you call it chocolate pie?
For the sake of this, yes, I will refer to it as chocolate
Okay,
pie.
so outside of this, what do you refer to it as?
I don't really talk about chocolate pie a whole lot.
Okay. Moving on.
You see what I'm saying, though? It's delicious. That doesn't mean I don't think it isn't good.
I hear what you're saying.
Okay.
We'll leave it at that.
Okay.
So for Georgia Southern football, offensive breakdown for what you can expect. And again, there are things that may change, especially personnel, over the next couple of days and weeks. Only not even a week into camp yet.
They haven't had full padded practice.
Right.
That's not until tomorrow.
So tomorrow will be the first full padded practice over at Eagle Creek. So you'll get the gnats, you'll get the dragonflies, you'll get the whole shebang getting across the bridge. But start at the quarterback position, because this is probably the one that has the most change in it on the offensive side, at least. Everybody has talked about, ever since he arrived on campus, Kyle Van Treese transferring in from Buffalo. There's a couple of others behind him that may be new names. Colton Fitzgerald coming in from Boise State has kind of settled in as that 2. Connor Sigelski in that realm as well. There's going to be a lot of... Coach Helton talked about it at Media Day. Van Treese is your starting quarterback at this point in time. He has taken every rep with the 1. He's your QB1 at this point in time. Now, he was also very transparent. That's subject to change week to week, as everybody is. But right now, Kyle Van Treese is your QB1. But there's going to be some competition between who is the QB2. And we've seen Georgia Southern football, and obviously it's a very different scheme of what Georgia Southern's accustomed to. Quarterback, hopefully, not going to be taking quite as many hits as they were before. But you can't go into a college football season feeling good without a decent, at least, QB2. And I think you've got a lot of really good options to choose from if you're Clay Helton and that entire offensive staff.
And the reason why it's even more important, it's great to have Van Treese coming here from Buffalo. This is it. It's got 1 year.
Yeah.
So whoever steps in, that process of getting comfortable begins now. It doesn't take needing snap with the ones in a live game situation to say, okay, I can do this. That's why you have all these reps in spring ball. That's why you lift all these weights, all this conditioning, the nutrition, the film. Everything has a way of fitting together. So if your chance comes up maybe earlier than you were expecting, you're not surprised by it. You're already ready to go. Sigelski started the final 2 games last year. I know it was a different system. He's looked pretty solid so far. He's got the fleetest feet, I think, of everybody in the quarterback room. Van Treese would have something to say about that, but hopefully he doesn't have a chance to worry about running very much. I've liked Colton Fitzgerald so far. I wasn't sure how he was going to mix in. Didn't get a whole lot of opportunity at Boise State. Hank Bachmeier has been their starter for the last 3 years. Coming back east looking for an opportunity. Him and Sigelski have split the reps with the 2s. But Van Treese is not only the guy, but it's his room. And for somebody to come in this quickly, take over that room, take over this offense as they look to him as a leader. And you look at somebody who hasn't taken a snap here. He represented the team at Media Day.
Yeah.
That's what they think of him.
Yeah. And like I said, there's going to be competition, and it may not be somebody as QB2 for the entire year, and it may be a floating situation if you have to go to your backup of what the situation is. There may not be a set backup quarterback, quote-unquote, between Fitzgerald, Sigelski. You even throw in somebody like a Kyle Toole transferring in from Troy. He's taking some snaps on the offensive side. You've got a lot of different ways you can go in order to get the ball to the quarterback.
And for Toole, he was in the discussion to be in the quarterback rotation going into last year, but he had the wrist injury, ended up leaving the team. At Statesboro's benefit, second time in the last few years that Georgia Southern's picked up a former Troy quarterback, going back to Will Lovett. Also a freshman like Zach Roseman. Richie Langford is a transfer from the College of San Mateo in Southern California. Not going to get a chance to see much David Dallas. He's still rehabbing from the offseason surgery and the injury. How he's going to get worked in, that remains to be seen. And how everybody else adapts to wanting to be the number 2.
Yeah.
You have to look at this as, I may not get to play a whole lot, but if I'm not ready to play when my number gets called, I may not get to play a whole lot after that.
Yeah.
This is an ever-evolving situation. It's Van Treese. There's no doubt about that. This is Van Treese's offense to run. But for everybody else, you're fighting for the 2, but that could quickly become a lot more if the situation presents.
On the running back side for Georgia Southern football, you know what you've got, and obviously a couple of weeks ago, word came out of J.D. King retiring from the game of football. Obviously, this was more of a surprise to folks outside the FOC, but you still had to kind of shift of what your focus was, and you know you have guys like Gerald Green, Jalen White, even a guy like A.J. Brown who has been in this program, but a lot of different ways that you can go about it from the running back perspective as well.
I felt bad for JD, but
Yeah.
you could kind of feel it coming. He didn't really do much during the spring. He basically became a coach on the field. And for him to make the announcement, at least it takes some of the secrecy out of it, so you don't have to wonder if he's going to be getting snaps, if he's going to be back at some point this year. I'm excited to see what Gerald Green can do coming in as the guy, because he's had a slow start each of the last 2 years. But you think to 2020, he exploded against Troy with the long run. Last year was against the Cajuns when he went for almost 200 and those 3 touchdowns in game number 4. Jalen White, we've been waiting for him to be a consistent part of the offense. He's had his spurts, whether it was Arkansas State or Texas State. He was a big reason why Georgia Southern won both of those games, 2 of the 3 last year. But then how do you incorporate an A.J. Brown, who's been waiting on scout team for a couple of years? Somebody who's 100% every time he's touching the football, former walk-on from Harlem, which has produced a lot of talent for this program. But then deeper down the line, it's Tyler Jordan transferring in from Georgia Military. It's Robert Edwards III. It's Omari now going by O.J. Arnold. And I'm glad they're doing that, because instead of Omari and Amari, you get O.J. Arnold. He looks to be the quickest guy in that running back room out of Brooks County. Somebody that may have a chance immediately, may have to wait his turn. But also, Terrence Gibbs is someone that's going to attract a lot of attention when he gets healthy.
Yeah.
He's coming off the knee injury, which is why teams kind of went away from him. He was still committed to Florida. Changed that at the very end. Billy Napier takes over. He doesn't continue with the commitment. He reopens things. That's I'm coming to Georgia Southern. That one may take a little bit longer to get involved, but simply looking at him physically at practice, he is not built like somebody you would expect at Georgia Southern.
No. And not being that young at Georgia Southern.
He is one of the most put-together running backs I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And that's out of pads. So when the chance is given to wear pads and get back to doing what he wants to do, which is the reason why he came here, it might be more passing this year, but looking in that room and seeing all that talent, it's an embarrassment of riches if you're assistant coach Matt Merritt.
You look at wide receivers for Georgia Southern, you expected to see a lot of transition, a lot of differences in this room, but you have some, but there's not as much transition and changeover. There's different positioning, and there's different ways different folks are being used, but it's the same characters for the most part that you've seen in years past. It's just they're used a little bit different. You look at a guy like Caleb Hood, he went from that slot. Was he a running back? Was he a slot? Was he a wideout? What was he going to do? And we've talked about it a lot between him, Amari Jones kind of in the same boat. You have to get them the ball. They're too good to not get them the ball. It was just a matter of how were you going to do it. Now they're strictly running, or wide receivers rather. Now you've got to get them the ball through the air, and you've got guys looking up and down this wide receivers room. There's a lot of talent. There's a lot of speed in this room. Caleb Hood, Amari Jones, Derwin Burgess, who had a huge year at the end of the year for Georgia Southern last year, and a big part of the successes that Georgia Southern did have last year. Sam Kennerson, the converted quarterback that went to wide receiver in the middle of last year. Darius Lewis had a couple of big plays last year for Georgia Southern. And then you do add a couple of new faces. Jeremy Singleton comes in from Houston. J.J. McAfee transferring in from Georgia Military. Marcus Sanders, a freshman, coming in from Montezuma. And then Parker Self kind of working with the twos the last week or so, transferring in from Florida State. There is so much talent in that wide receiver room.
And that's the reason why when you've got a transition like this from an option scheme to more of a balanced spread, more emphasis on pass for sure, but it's going to be more when you're used to running the ball 50 to 55 times per game. But with the talent that was already here, plus the infusion of what this staff has been able to do, that's why I don't know that this is going to take as long to get comfortable as what usually is the case. Now, it happens different speeds everywhere, but it's not usually as drastic of a change. It would be more so if you were going from the under center flex bone to 5 wide. And look, that's happened at Georgia Southern before, and there's a reason why that didn't go as well as it could have, because you literally had to look for a different kind of player. And I know that's been 10, 15 years, but at the same time, what was recruited still is working because you had this need to find out what these guys could actually do. And I'll go back to Caleb and Amari for a minute. One thing I feel really safe in saying is that those two will not combine for one touchdown this year.
No.
If Georgia Southern is going to be successful, they are going to be heavily involved. And that one touchdown that the two of them scored was Caleb running the football on an option against Troy. So those two combined for no receiving touchdowns. That's not going to happen this year. Jeremy Singleton is going to draw a lot of attention. He can play in the slot as well. Derwin Burgess has put on weight. I can't tell for sure how much, but he looks noticeably bigger. I think Amari's up 15 pounds. By the way, he is at a really good camp. He might be the most impressive guy on the offensive side. And then for Sam Kenderson, now that he's healthy, we know what he can do speed-wise. Getting the ball in his hands, that's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
Once you fully learn the position, once you get fully settled, then that's what Ryan Applin can look at, Brian Elson can look at. That's what Clay Helton can look at to figure out, we got a lot of guys, but we're not going to pick the wrong thing with all this talent that we have.
And somebody that you can kind of throw into that room, technically a tight end, but you've seen Bo Johnson working a little bit more with the wide receivers, getting out from that traditional H-back right around the line. He's been able to split out into that slot, even get out a little bit wider at times. He's somebody that I think can have a absolutely huge year. I know Russ is a huge fan of Bo Johnson. A lot of us are. But he is somebody that you always talk about how much guys gain over the offseason. It looks like Bo has slimmed up a little bit, but a good kind of slim up. And being able to change his body to where he can go out wide if he needs to, but he can also has the built to him that he can still be that tight end and block for you like he's been used to the last couple of years.
And look, on the roster, he's still going to be listed as a tight end. Isn't as if he is going to be in the class of a Singleton or a Hood to make that change from tight end to wide receiver. Incidentally, J.J. McAfee has shifted to tight end for the 2022 season, so he will work with Bo along with Jace Hancock, and when Ethan Durham comes back from injury, that'll give them a lot more support to work with Coach Applin. But at the same time, there's not going to be a whole lot of hand-on-the-ground tight end work this year. That doesn't mean that tight ends won't be involved in this offense relative to the personnel grouping that Coach Ellis uses when he's deciding who to send into the game.
Also got a couple of new tight ends. You talked about Chase Hancock whenever he's able to come back. Dylan Snyder transferring in from the Citadel. Evan Lester, a freshman coming in from Dalton. So you've got a lot of different ways that you can use the tight end. And a lot of different body types of what you need your tight end to do will determine who's going to be the tight end in that package.
The one thing to note about the alignment of the tight end this year, and this was a big rule change that was revealed by coordinator officials John McDade in day 2 of Sunbelt Conference Media Day. Unfortunately, that was the West Day. We didn't have a chance to speak with him while we were in New Orleans. But if the tight end lines up as an H, which means he has some kind of shade on the tackle, he would still be eligible to cut. Now, I'm saying that because even though Georgia Southern has had option in its tradition, cut blocking has been key. But in this case, if cut blocking is still involved in the run game, the only people that can cut now are the 5 interior offensive linemen in the tackle box. There's no second-level cutting. There's no sideline cutting. Anything outside that tackle box is illegal. But outside of the 5 that are lined up, if you're in an H position, which the slot back, if you have any kind of shade over the tackle, you are permitted to cut as long as it's part of your initial surge. If you're hand on the ground tight end, you cannot do that. If you go in an over formation where, say, you've got 3 offensive linemen on one side, the true unbalanced, the third lineman, even though he is a lineman by build, he would be considered a tight end and would not be eligible to cut. So depending on when the tight end gets used, that's an important thing to watch, and I'm going to guess the teams that are run heavy, especially your option-specific teams, that's something that they're going to have to contest with because that's going to have that position and the philosophy coached so much differently than it has over the course of the last few years.
Talk about the offensive linemen, and it's very similar to what the wide receiver room looked like. You thought there were going to be a decent amount of change in the offensive line room, but you look at it, and a lot of the same names you've heard the last couple of years. Brian Miller, Logan Langmeyer, Khalil Crowder, Caleb Kelly, names that you've heard the last couple of years, but in this new scheme, this looks like a different offensive line.
The one noticeable change is Brian Miller, having spent his first couple of years at tackle, he has bumped into left guard. Rasheed Miller, who looks the part, 6'7", better than 300 pounds, from the state of Florida, redshirted a year ago. He slid into left tackle for now. You've got a number of transfers representing Elon Marshall. We've talked with Danny Corbett yesterday as part of New to the GS Flock, and you can listen to those interviews with new guys to the program. They're up on social media via SoundCloud, but Corbett can play everywhere on the offensive line. Brian Ellis told us in one of the summer sit-downs that he's comfortable going with maybe up to 10 or 11 offensive linemen. And with an offense that's going to go as fast as this one is planning on being, you need a lot of big, healthy, in-shape guys to execute the pace that they're going to try to go at.
So we've gone through all of the position groups, but overall this offense, and I think you just talked about it, the biggest thing that you see from this group is the speed. And I'm not talking about once the ball is snapped. I'm talking about from once the previous play has ended till the next one gets snapped. There's not a whole lot of time in there.
Ideally, Ellis has also said that he's looking for 80 plays per game, whether that's 40 runs, 40 passes, 30, 50, 60, 20, whatever. However you got to get the win is what you're going to do.
Yeah.
But they're shooting for somewhere around 80 plays per game. Some perspective, nobody in the country ran 80 plays a game last year. North Texas was the highest at 79.
Oh, so close.
Seth Luttrell, yeah, they do think. So it might be ambitious, but if they can get settled early, and that's why I think having Morgan State at game 1 can work, because you can run your pace, do things your way. Yeah, Nebraska's week 2, whatever, we'll talk about them. But being able to see a team that may allow you to maximize what you've got on that side of the football, at the same time, though, not showing a whole lot. And I know that that's a tough balance to strike. But the ability to do what you want to relative to what you put on film for the team that you're going to see the next week in Lincoln, and of course we'll preview Morgan State once we get there, but this is going to be a season of discovery for this offense, not week by week, but this is going to be a snap-by-snap thing that Brian Ellis and all these coaches are going to realize. They see what they have now 5 days into camp, but they're going to continue to find out what they have once they go full pad starting tomorrow and then going forward.
The thing that everybody is asking, everybody is talking to us about, and I'm sure asking everybody associated with Georgia Southern football in some way, shape, or form, what's the balance? What is the pass to run? Coach Helton has said since he got here, ideally, and it may take a couple of years to get to it, it'd be 60-40. There's been a lot of, and for those that have been out at practice, you've seen it, there's a lot of passing in these practices, but it's the point of emphasis that you've got to make in the preseason because that's the biggest change. Yeah. That's not to say they're not running during practice. There's 2-3 whole periods devoted to the run game. There is a lot of passing, and kind of looking at it from the outside looking in, it looks like it's extremely pass heavy, which is going to be a lot more passing than what Georgia Southern folks are used to.
Absolutely.
But Coach Helton has said from the time he stepped foot off the plane in Statesboro, you don't have a running back room like this. You don't have athletes like this and not run the football.
You might see 40 passes a game sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's going to be more, sometimes it's going to be less, but most of the time, if you see between 30 and 40, you've also got 30 and 40 runs.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't automatically mean that you're balanced. To me, balance means you constantly keep that defense guessing so they can't get your tendency. So, okay, that doesn't mean run, pass. That way you've got 40 runs and 40 passes. If you're an option team, running the football is what you do, but you can dress it up a number of different ways so they can't exactly see where you're trying to do, who you're trying to block, who you're trying to key on. The idea of a passing game means that they've got to account for it, but you can still get in formations where a running formation might be max protect for a deep ball. But you can get into a passing formation with 5 wides that turns into a quarterback draw. You could motion somebody in the backfield, create your dive like you've had. You might see a little bit of option.
Yeah.
That still could be part. And I think Coach Eldon has mentioned that a couple of times. It's not like you're burning that part of the playbook completely. Yeah. It's not going to be used a whole lot, but that still could be a part once they add more and more to this playbook. You might see 10 consecutive passes, which that might be how it is for a little bit. But the idea behind balance is once they think, I'm talking about the defense, once the defense thinks it has an idea, that's the ability to give the same look, but run the football.
There's something, and you talk about the deep ball. The deep ball looks really good from Kyle Van Treese. That much I can tell you.
Wings up.
Yeah, a lot of it. But I go back to something that Russ and I have talked about a lot over the last couple of years, and I don't know that it has necessarily been something that Georgia Southern has been able to do. It's been more of what Russ and I have said, this is what you would like it to be. But throwing the ball when you want to rather than when you have to. And you flip it to the other side, running the ball when you want to, not when you have to. Because there's been many opportunities over the last couple of years where you feel like Georgia Southern is backed into, okay, you've got to run the ball, whether it be because that's what the defense has given you or because the pass isn't working. On the flip side, you get into a 3rd and long, there's not a whole lot of dives that are called at that point. And so you've got to be able to do what you want to rather than what is predictable from the defense like you talked about. And I think that's going to be the biggest factor that Georgia Southern has been able to exploit this year, being able to do what you want to, not necessarily what you feel like you have to do and you're backed into a corner with.
And now you're in a spot where you can be really good or potentially really good at both.
Yeah.
Instead of having to be good at throwing the football, because when you're throwing it 10 to 15 times per game, most of the time, those are deep shots.
Yeah.
When option teams pass, they're going for home runs because the safeties are flying up, the corners are blitzing, trying to take away the dive, trying to negate the pitch or the QB run. Option pass typically means you're throwing the ball at least 25, 30 yards downfield. Now, though, with the way that this offense is being designed, you're going to see a lot of Gerald Green. You're going to see a lot of Jalen White. You might see a little bit of Hood and Amari Jones involved. When O.J. Arnold gets involved, when Tyler Jordan gets involved, because I think there's about 7 different guys that can handle the football at this point, it's going to tilt towards the pass. But the way that this is being built and the scheme that has been devised, because you've got a guy in Brian Ellis that even though it's being looked at as, well, Georgia Southern's going to throw the ball 50 times. He was at Western Kentucky last year. Bailey Zappi threw for over 5,900 yards and 60-some touchdowns. But those offenses were only successful because they had the ability to run the football to keep the defense honest.
Yeah.
And no running back situation that he has dealt with outside of maybe having Ronald Jones at USC, the running back room has never been as thick and as deep as it is in this situation here, at least with the allotment that this 22 team has. Jalen White has had his time. Gerald Green has had his time. A number of other guys are going to get their opportunities. This is still going to be a team that is going to need to run the football. That's going to be nice seeing Kyle Van Treese pick apart opposing defenses and watch these receivers show their true talent more than just 10 to 15 times per game.
Yeah.
But that's good.
Yeah.
Because that's only going to make that run game that much better.
Yeah. This is a offense that at the end of last year and you knew you were going into this new system and you're kind of thinking to yourself, okay, what does this look like in year one? You know what ideally it looks like in year 2, year 3, year 4 down the line. But what does it look like right now? I think you saw a good transition just in the spring and the short amount of time you had there. There's even more of that now that you get into fall camp. And Coach Helton has said anybody that can come out to fall camp, fall practices, whatever, you can come out tomorrow 10 to 12 at Eagle Creek. Again, we talked about it last week. Take a long lunch. You got a meeting at 9:30. There's no reason to get back to the office.
Everything's fine. It's summer.
It's timing.
It's still the summer.
Right. Go ahead and come out to Eagle Creek tomorrow and be able to watch what this offense looks like. Wanted to talk about in our last couple of minutes, what camp has looked like, especially today.
Yeah. Today was fun.
Yeah, today was pretty fun. So going through probably about the middle of practice, they started doing team, and it was, for the most part, it was good on good, 2-on-2s, and you were going full team. Obviously not full go, but at times it was more full go than I think was intended. But at the beginning of the team period, the defense was holding their own pretty well, and they got a little chirpy. They started dancing and singing, and they were feeling good. And the offense, I think, took exception.
They responded, though.
And the offense responded. The probably back half of the team period, so the, I guess, final quarter, of practice.
Yeah.
Quarter. The offense pretty well had their way, and the last couple of plays, obviously quarterback is a touch off. There's no thud, there's no nothing. Don't touch him. Don't
even shake his hand.
Don't even think about it. And so there was a couple of times that quarterback goes into the end zone, offense, the second to last play, quarterback goes into the end zone. Would he have been tackled? Would he have not? Who knows?
The offense was convinced he scored.
Correct. Offense, the entire offense goes and huddles around.
Yes.
At the back of the end zone, like they had just won the Sun Belt Conference Championship. Coach Helton comes in, puts his foot on about the half-yard line, holds the hand up and said, nope, right here.
Or let's do it again. Hey, you might have scored. Do it again.
Do it again. And so that fired the defense up. So offense has to go back. I think it was the twos that were out.
Yes, because Sigelski was the one that scored.
Yep. And lo and behold, Sigelski comes back, twos break, go out, run, touchdown again. Here comes the offense again.
That time it was for sure.
That time it was for sure. Practice over. But I think you have to have stuff like that in a practice, especially when we talk about camp isn't as long as it used to be, and you don't have 2-a-days, and you don't have, I'm not going to say you don't have the grind because it's obviously still a grind, but you don't have the grueling long days like you used to. But you still have to have things like that to just break up the monotony of coming to practice every day, being able to do the same thing over and over again every day to get ready for that September 3rd. And days like that, it shows how much these guys care. I mean, there's chirp in between. It's all in good nature. Yeah. It's not like people are actually getting ticked at one another. Well, afterwards they'll be fine.
When the whistle blows, it's...
Yeah. Once the whistle blows, everybody's shaking hands, and we're all good then. But you've got to have that kind of head-to-head, nose-to-nose, and today I think was something really good to see.
I'll go on record as this because I was thinking about this as I was walking down here. I don't know that I've ever seen a camp with this much energy.
Yeah. And that's everybody.
And look, for a couple of days, defense had the offense, had a chance to see Saturday's practice. Defense, for the most part, owned the offense. And after practice, it was made, I'll just say it was made known that the defense had the upper hand. So the offense had to respond. And even today, defense started out pretty well. Had a couple of interceptions. Derek Canteen had a nice interception during 7-on-7 period. Recovered a couple of fumbles. But once the offense had that snap of the finger, they had that moment where they set their feet and showed who they were. That's when they scored multiple touchdowns. They had the 2, we'll say, on the back-to-back plays. The response that they showed in the conditions that they were dealing with against a defense that was, for the sake of discussion, they were dominating.
Yeah.
The defense was dominating them. I loved it.
Yeah.
But it's all back to this idea that whether you're 5th or 6th on the depth chart, whether you're a starter, whether you're an equipment manager, a new assistant coach, I don't know that I've seen a camp. In fact, I've not seen a camp here where everybody is as energized as they are. Georgia Southern was 3-9 last year.
Yeah.
But for so many people that are here, they weren't here for that.
Yeah.
So to them, they've heard about it, and they know that this program needs to be revitalized. But in a good way, they're not fueled by that. The guys that were here are. So they can use personal experience to push them forward. But for the other guys that are simply here, they don't know any better. They're just going. They're busting each other up. Helmets are knocking. Full pads tomorrow will be another thing over at Eagle Creek. But it just seems that everybody is bought into this.
Yeah.
And this isn't something that you expect to see after a couple of practices. Look, we're going to see the scrimmage this weekend. Saturday night, we'll see the scrimmage next weekend down in Savannah as part of the Fan Fest that's taking place at Memorial Stadium. But from a standpoint of mentality, what Coach Helton, I'm sure, wants, he almost has, I would say. I'm not going to say it's there because then you might think, oh, this team's going 13-0. They're going to play in a New Year's 6. Pump them a little bit. But what is trying to be built, they have been able to accomplish a lot simply by the collective energy that is being put out on that field each day, each rep, each blow of the whistle, each period. Don't know what that's going to mean in terms of wins and losses, but just from what we have seen these first couple of days, this has been really good to watch.
There's something very similar, and it's a very similar conversation that you and I were having a couple of years ago when Brian Berg took over Georgia Southern men's basketball. I remember going to a couple of the first practices that Coach Berg had with men's basketball, and you and I both were like, whoa, this is different.
Yeah.
That's not a knock on what was here before.
Not at all.
Not saying it was bad. This is just a different level. And it was because Coach Berg had been at the next level. He had played for a national championship, for gosh sakes. You're getting very similar feeling from Coach Helton and his practices. I remember going out last week, whenever the first day of practices started last Wednesday, you're like, oh, this is different.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to, it's not something you can say, okay, that's different, that's different, that's different. There's some of that. And again, it's not a knock on what it's been here before, because obviously at times it has worked very well. It's just different, and it's different at a different level, if that makes any sense.
A bunch of little things creating a big thing. And for those that would like a little bit more background on this and want to understand what we're talking about, like Colin mentioned, everything's open. Practices are open, whether it's at Paulson Stadium or Eagle Creek. That schedule is posted on gseagles.com, on social media. So if you'd like to get a glimpse of what we're talking about, we'd love to see you, because I'm not sitting here and saying that Georgia Southern is going to win the East Division. They're going to win a conference championship. That would be beyond their wildest dreams. But just know that your program, 5 days into camp, where things could be in a much different situation, this program is in a really good spot. I feel like I'm being very honest in putting it that way.
And tell your bosses that Danny Reed told you to let you off of work about 9:30 so you can come out to Eagle Creek tomorrow, 10 to 12. Tell him Danny said that you have to get off.
The little fella on the Facebook Live told me that I need to go watch the Eagles, and I don't want to let them down. Plenty of places to stand out at Eagle Creek.
Yes, exactly. So we hope to see you out there tomorrow, and you can tell us whether chocolate pie is a pie. By the way, Bob McKessie says no. Come on, Bob.
If I could reach one, I've reached the world.
Come on, Bob. Need some help here, buddy. But before we wrap this one up, we mentioned it earlier. It's going to be Donors Weekend this week.
Yes.
And so you've got a 2-day event.
Mm-hmm.
Got some golf. You got the Fan Fest. You got practice. You got scrimmage on Saturday. But Friday night, there's a new layer to this.
Yeah, this is going to be cool.
Stephanie Roberts and the folks over at Georgia Southern Athletic Foundation pulling this together the last couple of weeks. You are going to be a big part of it as well. So the floor is yours, Mr. Reed.
Come to J.I. Clements Stadium for a home run derby. Now, you've seen a little bit about this on social and gseagles.com. There are going to be funds raised to help with the Georgia Southern Baseball Expansion Project, with the Wiggins Building, with the batting cages, and basically improving the J.I. Clements experience from what it already is. But Victor Roach is going to be back. Of course, he had the 30 home run season in 2011. That was the first year of the new bats, and he still hit 30 bombs.
Is he bringing his BB core bat?
I wouldn't see a reason, unless you don't want to hurt baseballs, but that could be fun to watch him swing a drop 5 instead of a drop 3. Aaron Mizell is going to be back to participate. Of course, he put on the show when the Sun Belt was still doing home run derbies at the conference tournament. He won the one at Troy in 2015, just launching ball after ball over their monster, the 30-foot high wall. And Noah Ledford and Corey Dowdell are going to be participants from the current Eagle squad.
Oh. If
If you've never seen Corey Dowdell take batting practice, you are going to want to be there. You've seen what Noah Ledford can do in a live game. Well, you saw Dowdell, if you were there for the Troy game, hit one about 420. But there's also going to be spots for donors to participate. And more information on that is going to be made available later this week on gseagles.com and social media. But that'll be the kickoff on Friday night over at J.I. Clemens, helping generate some funds and awareness for the Baseball Expansion Project. Golf tournament on Saturday morning. And then Saturday night, those who have donated to the Irk Russell Fund get a chance to get a tour of the FOC with AP and Tracy, and the scrimmage starting at 7 o'clock under the lights.
Are you getting any hacks in?
As the MC on the mic, yes, I'll get plenty of hacks in. I'm not swinging a bat.
Why not?
Because I'm not doing that.
Oh, come on. Not even one? When's the last time you swung a bat?
I swing a bat all the time. I just haven't hit a baseball in probably, I couldn't tell you.
We need to do that.
We got the cages. We just never have time.
No. On the field.
On the field?
Yeah.
You know, it might have been, I don't think I took BP the day that we came back when the COVID shutdown happened. I took a lot of grounders at third, but I don't think I hit that day. I don't remember.
We got to make that happen.
You remember, it's a home run derby, not a swing and miss derby or a hit tappers back to home plate derby.
Oh, you would make contact. You seem like a big contact guy.
I was a high on base guy. I walked a lot.
There you go.
I was defensive minded catcher, not a whole lot of offense.
That's fine.
Like the movie says, I had trouble with the curve.
It's a good movie. Very good movie.
I heard his hands move. That was going to be fun. That was going to be a good time.
That'll wrap up this week's edition of Inside Eagle Nation. Again, next week we will continue with our Georgia Southern football preview, diving into the defensive side of the ball. And
Will Harris's boys next week.
Gonna have you got to catch up with Will Harris a couple of weeks ago as part of the summer sit-downs. That one's available, as well as the other two with Brian Ellis and Turner West of the special teams. All three of those are available on Georgia Southern football and Georgia Southern Athletics social medias, but we will dive into what the Georgia Southern defense will look like coming up in 2022 next week. So go ahead and get your questions ready. Go ahead and get them in. You can comment anything on Facebook, tweet us at GS Sports Network, email us at gssnbooth@gmail.com, or text us 912-274-3607. Until next week, for the voice of the Eagles, Danny Reed, this is Colin Lacy saying so long, everybody.
You've been listening to Inside Eagle Nation, powered by Learfield, the official podcast of Georgia Southern Athletics.